welcome to Goshen County Library Virtual Story Time. Today we're going to read 3 books for you, and that's what we're usually going to do every week. We'll probably read 3 books. We'll give you an idea on how the little craft in your packet is going to look or work, and please remember to pick up your packets at the Goshen County Library. Here we go. The first one, The Itsy Bitsy Pilgrim. The Itsy Bitsy Pilgrim sailed the ocean blue. On the Mayflower to a home that's new. He helped build the houses, he helped shovel the snow. Then some itsy bitsy new friends came to say hello. The Itsy Bitsy Pilgrim invited them to play, and then made dinner on a special day. Then he gave thanks for all they share. The first Thanksgiving meal was made with love and care. Next one, Too Many Pumpkins. Every year at springtime, Rebecca Estelle planted just enough seeds in her garden to grow vegetables for a long winter. She planted carrots and beans, tomatoes, peas, corn, and rutabagas. She grew a little bit of everything except pumpkins. Rebecca Estelle hated pumpkins. When she was a little girl, money had been scarce. For an entire month, all there had been to eat were pumpkins. Baked pumpkins, steamed pumpkins, boiled pumpkins, stewed pumpkins, smashed pumpkins, rotten pumpkins, breakfast pumpkins, lunch pumpkins, dinner pumpkins. Enough pumpkins. When things finally improved and there was more money to buy food, Rebecca Estelle decided she would never eat pumpkins again, or even look at one, not ever. And she didn't until one autumn day, long after Rebecca Estelle's hair had turned snowy white, she was raking the leaves that fell from each fall from her black walnut tree, and her cat, Esmeralda, was scattering them just as quickly. All of a sudden, the pumpkin truck passed by. Oh, she heard it coming, and she knew what it was. It rumbled by at harvest time every year. She turned her back and concentrated on picking up the last fallen leaf. She managed to ignore the truck until splat! An enormous pumpkin tumbled off the truck and smashed into slimy orange smithereens all over the edge of her yard. "Come back here and get this pumpkin," she yelled, but the driver sped by. "Well, I won't touch it," Rebecca Estelle insisted, getting her shovel from the barn. "And I won't look at it," she added as she shoveled dirt on top of the pumpkin pieces. "I won't think about that pumpkin ever again," she declared. And she didn't until spring, when Rebecca Estelle was admiring the new sprouts in her garden. She noticed Esmeralda playing in some big green leaves growing at the edge of the yard. "How curious," she said, going over to inspect them. "I didn't plant anything here." Then Rebecca Estelle remembered the pumpkin truck and the slimy pumpkin smithereens. "Pumpkin!" she cried in disgust. "Come out of there, Esmeralda. I will not water those plants. I will not tend them. I will ignore them and they will die." She picked up Esmeralda and stomped inside. But a week later, when Rebecca Estelle peered out her window, she saw that the vines had grown. She tramped to the barn, got her garden tools, and went to work on the pumpkin vines. She cut and dug until not one was left growing. Now, there will be no pumpkin," she smiled and went back inside. But the next week, when she was weeding the garden, she noticed that the pumpkin vines had grown back. Rebecca Estelle marched inside and snapped the curtains shut. The only thing to do is ignore them. They won't grow if I don't take care of them, she murmured. So rain or shine, all spring and summer, she never looked out the front window. She used only the back door and never even glanced towards the vine. No, neither did Esmeralda. Rebecca Estelle ignored the vines so well that in time she forgot why she wasn't using the front door, until one autumn day when she and Esmeralda went to rake the leaves that fell each fall from the black walnut tree in front of the house. Pumpkins, Rebecca Estelle shrieked. Pumpkin vines had twisted under the bushes, over the bird bath, through the porch rail, and into the rocking chair. The entire yard was a sea of plump, round pumpkins. Rebecca Estelle could no longer ignore them. She plopped down on the pumpkin nearest her, putting her hand over her face. Whatever will I do, Esmeralda? She cried. How will I get rid of this many pumpkins? She thought and thought. Her mind went back to all the pumpkins she had eaten as a young girl, when pumpkins were the only food her family had. Well, we won't let them stay here, she told Esmeralda. Some people might need these pumpkins, and I suppose there are folks crazy enough to like them. We'll give them away. She marched off to get her wheelbarrow. Rebecca Estelle struggled to lift the first pumpkin, then the second, and the third. She huffed and she puffed as she wheeled the loaded wheelbarrow into the lane. I'm too tired to deliver these heavy pumpkins now, Rebecca Estelle grumbled. She mopped her brow with her apron and wondered what to do next. Perhaps if I make them into pies, they will be easier to deliver. Such a nuisance. She went to work. She scooped the slimy seeds out of the pumpkins and cut away the shells. After she boiled the pumpkin meat, she mixed it with eggs, milk, sugar, flour, cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves to make each rich pie. Then Rebecca Estelle made pumpkins. Tarts, pumpkin muffins, pumpkin cakes, pumpkin bread, pumpkin pudding, pumpkin cookies, until pumpkin dishes spilled out of every cupboard, drawer, and cubbyhole, and the seeds were a mountain in the corner. Well, that's the first batch, Rebecca Estelle said, dusting her flour hands. Now to deliver them. She put the wheelbarrow outside the kitchen door, then loaded it up with pumpkin treats. When it was full, just the thought of delivering all those pumpkin dishes made Rebecca Estelle tired. If only people would come to get them, she said. Then she had an idea. Rebecca Estelle whirled around and hurried back into the house for a kitchen knife. This should get people to come, Rebecca Estelle cried. She took her knife and sat in the middle of the pumpkin patch. She carved a smiling face on a nice round pumpkin, a very scary snaggly tooth face on a tall thin pumpkin, and boo on a short squat pumpkin. She was so busy carving pumpkins, she hardly noticed how dark it was getting. When she could no longer see, she went to the shelf on the back porch and got out the stack of candles she kept for emergencies. If this doesn't get people to come here, we'll have to deliver them all ourselves, she muttered to Esmeralda. Look at all those pumpkins. Rebecca Estelle peered into the darkness for a long time. She didn't see anything. Still she watched until finally she saw a light, faint at first, then brighter and then more lights bobbing through the night. Here they come, she shouted. Esmeralda, let's heat some apple cider. Young and old, everyone in town came. Rebecca Estelle, we thought you hated pumpkins, they said. We saw your jack-o'-lantern from the end of the road and came for a closer look. I was hoping you would, said Rebecca Estelle. Where did you ever find all those pumpkins? People asked. I came by them quite by accident, Rebecca Estelle said, smiling. Would you like some pumpkin pie? There's plenty. She winked at Esmeralda. Everyone enjoyed the pumpkin pie and cider and had a good time. So did Rebecca Estelle. And when they were ready to go home, she made sure each carried a jack-o'-lantern, a bag of seeds for roasting, and a pumpkin treat. Rebecca Estelle gave away everything that reminded her of the pumpkins she had always hated until all that remained was a handful of seeds. Those she tucked snugly into her pocket where they would be safe until planting time next spring. That was a good one about pumpkins. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're going to do first in our packet with the pumpkin. That's why I chose that book. In your packet, you're going to have a color page. It talks about the parts of the pumpkin. And so you cut them out and you put them in the right little box where they belong. And then you're going to be able to string a pumpkin, okay, and you can do this, and you can do it however you want, okay, you just go back and forth, in and out, and you can do this several times. You can make different designs on your pumpkin, okay, so that's what you're going to do on that first week, this first week of story time. Now we're going to read our last book, Extra Yarn. I chose this one because we're using yarn for pumpkin stitching. Maybe if I can get to the right page here. On a cold afternoon in a cold little town where everywhere you looked was either the white of snow or the black of soot from chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled with yarn of every color. So she went home and knit herself a sweater. And when Annabelle was done, she had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars too, but there was still extra yarn. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. But it turned out he was. And even after she made a sweater for Nate and his dog and for herself and for Mars, she still had extra yarn. At school, Annabelle's class could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet," shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone, Annabelle. That sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning around to look at you." "Then I'll knit one for everyone," Annabelle said, "so you won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." But it turned out she could, and she did, even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she knit sweaters for her mom and dad, and for Mr. Pendleton and Mrs. Pendleton, and for Dr. Palmer, and for little Louise. She made sweaters for everyone except Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters or even long pants, who would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. "No sweater for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat, and even then Annabelle still had extra yarn. She made sweaters for all the dogs and all the cats and for other animals too. Soon Annabelle will run out of yarn, but it turned out she didn't. So Annabelle made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters, like the birdhouse, mailbox. Things began to change in that little town. It's getting pretty colorful, isn't it? News spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from all around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabelle's hand. One day, an archduke who was very fond of clothes sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabelle. "Little girl," said the archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn. I am willing to offer you $1,000,000. "No, thank you," said Annabelle, who was knitting a sweater for her pickup truck. The archduke's mustache twitched. "2,000,000, he said. Annabelle shook her head. "No, thanks." "10,000,000, shouted the archduke. "Take it or leave it." "Leave it," said Annabelle. "I won't sell the yarn." And she didn't. So that night, the archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabelle's house, and they stole the box and took it to the archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea. Back to his castle. The archduke put on his favorite song and sat in his best chair. Then he took out the box and he lifted the lid and he looked inside. His mustache quivered. It shivered. It trembled. The archduke hurled the box out the window and shouted, "Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse. You will never be happy again." No yarn. The box is empty. Now I can't get this page turned. But what happened to the box? Came all across the ocean. Back to Annabelle. It turned out she was. That's the end. Thanks, guys, for listening. See you next week.